You know that I am called the Count, because I really love to count. Sometimes I sit and count all day, but sometimes I get carried away.
I'll try not to get carried away here. Today's lesson is counting intervals. And an interval is the distance between two tones. So why count intervals? Well, it's so that we can understand a little bit better the tonal relationships we have in music. In the construction of scales, we have different patterns of intervals for different scales. And for the construction of chords, we have different groupings of tones played at the same time or over a space of time, resulting in particular quality of chords. That's best understood by examining and comparing intervals. So how to do this? How to count intervals, for instance. If these were two tones right next to each other, we would say that we have two tones. This note, compared to this one, we would call a second. Three tones, a third. Five tones, a fifth. Six, a sixth. Seven, a seventh. We have 7 letters in the musical alphabet. So if we apply that to the letters from A to B, would be a second. From A to C is a third. From A to D, a fourth. A to E, a fifth, and so forth. A to A is 8 tones. We call that an octave. And when we extend beyond the octave, that would become a ninth, 10th, 11th, and so forth. Great. Well, what does this look like if we were looking at a piano or a keyboard? So counting intervals on the keyboard is very much like we were counting the letters, except in this case we can put our thumb on that first tone, our index finger on the second tone, the middle finger, third finger on the third tone, ring finger on the fourth, pinky on the fifth, and we have the first 5 tones of our scale. The distance between the thumb and the index finger is a second, or the index finger and the middle finger, again a second, or the middle finger to the fourth finger, a second. When we start to make maybe leaps here, going from C, for instance, to F, we could probably easily judge this distance with our right hand by just simply realizing, okay, that's thumb and that's the fourth finger, so that's an interval of a fourth. This would be a skip of a third. We're skipping that note. Or a leap of a fifth, 5 notes. Beyond 5 notes, we have to, for the left hand or the right hand, have to extend. There's a seventh. An octave would be quite a stretch. And beyond this octave or 8 tones is the 9th and 10th. So on the staff, we could see this represented like this. Here's between C and D is a second, but if we were to compare these two notes, we would say going from C to E is a third. Okay? And if this was a song, we might have actually not seen this middle note in between. We would have just simply gone to this note and have to remember that there's a tone in between. If we were to play that on the piano, we would feel that distance because we'd be playing this with the thumb and this with the middle finger. We went from C to F. Again, we just did that a moment ago. Thumb to the fourth finger, a leap of a fourth. Thumb to the fifth finger, a leap of a fifth. And then beyond that, we have to stretch. There's an octave, 8 tones. Okay, well, when we had this in a piece of music and you're looking at the staff, it's a little bit more maybe difficult to count these intervals by the fact that these other notes aren't in between. So how can we do that maybe a little bit more easily is to recognize that there are patterns to the way that these tones here in the scale will appear on the staff. For instance, if we were just to look at notes that appear on the line, and we started here and went up, you would notice they're all odd number intervals. And similarly, if we went only on the spaces, they would be all odd number intervals. So if you're going from this note to this note, rather than count every one of those pitches, just simply count the spaces. 1, 3, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 7. So it becomes a little bit quicker that way, yes? And the same would be true for the line notes. Going from C to E, line to line, that's a third. If you count 2 lines to be a fifth, 3 lines a seventh, 4 lines a ninth, 11th, 13th. What about the even number intervals? That's going to be also pretty easy if you are aware that if you have a note that's on a space and the next note's on a line, just realize that you're going to be counting even numbers then. So the distance between D and E is a second. If I count up to the next line, it'll be a fourth, 6, 8. So I only have to count the lines between here and here. 1, 2, 3. 3 times 2 is going to be 6. 3 times 4 is going to be 8. 3 times 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be 10. Same thing would be true if we were going from a line note to a space note here. Second, fourth, 6, 8. You're just counting the spaces. Okay. So for odd numbers, to review, line to line is going to be line to line or space to space, and you just count the numbers. If you're dealing with even numbers, just simply count the numbers, number of lines or spaces between that note, multiply times 2 and you've got it. Or if you prefer 2, 4, 6, 8. Excellent. So, time for a song. Beautiful melody, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. When we take a look and examine a beautiful melody like this, one of the things we can do is to examine the interval relationships between the tones. So that's going to be your task. We'll stop the video and actually ask you to see if you can figure out the intervals between each of the melody tones. Welcome back. Okay, well, let's take a quick look through what you've learned. The first interval is an octave. This moves by step. That's a second. Line to line is a third. Another second, another second, another second, and down an octave. 2, 4, 6, 3 spaces there. That's a sixth, down by step. This line to this space. 1, 2, 3 spaces, an interval of a sixth. Down by step. Okay, now this measure down by a third, up by second, 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 and down by a third. This measure, third, second, 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 and down by a third. Okay, now looking at what we've learned from this with these markings, we may have noticed that these three bars have exactly the same pattern of intervals. And those similarities are worth noting, yes? Also, if we look at measures 1, 3, and 5, we see those measures have big leaps. That's an octave, sixth, and another sixth. The construction of leap followed by this little sequence, leap, held note, leap, sequence, sequence, and our final note. In fact, my goodness, we started on a C and we ended on the same note. Beyond this comparison here, we may have noticed that there is another subtle element in this piece that starts with this big leap and moves down by step. If we thought of this note, especially in terms of the text of the song, a young girl in Kansas wishing to be someplace colorful and wonderful, is depicted by this leap from Kansas to Oz of an octave. And then she finds herself back in Kansas at the end, doesn't she? And she does so, or our composer does this, by moving each measure down by step. C to C, down to B, down to A, down to G, down to F, down to E, down to D, down to C. You might ask yourself, did the composer really think about that? Quite possibly. And through our examination, we could find that the subtle elements of this melody are revealed. Now beyond that, you have a chance now to see if we can collect our information and maybe use it to construct our own melody. Okay, so in writing your 4-bar composition, consider the things we have learned about intervals, and in most in particular what we've learned about the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I'd like to encourage you to consider beginning and ending the piece on the note C, including some leap, maybe an octave or a fifth or a fourth. And if you can, try to construct a little melodic pattern. You can even draw from what you have in this piece and include it in your 4-bar melody. Great. Good luck.